People seem so content to go about with the status quo despite the incredible adventure that's out there and it's waiting for them. Welcome back to another episode of the Nomad's Notebook podcast, where we take on life's biggest questions. My name is Joe Maxwell, and today I want to explore the concept of change and why it is that we as humans seem so averse to it. One of the things that you're going to learn about me if you decide to stick around is I am literally obsessed with traveling. It's my favorite thing in the whole wide world to do. And a couple weeks ago, I took a solo trip to Eastern Europe. On my last day of that trip, I'm sitting on a bench on a balcony outside a place called Buda Castle in the city of Budapest. The weather was pretty bad that day. It was a really gray sky. There was a little sprinkle of rain coming down and a gusty wind blowing in. Maybe I was just feeling sentimental because it was my last day in the city, but there was a haunting beauty to this scene. Now, I'm sitting pretty high up on this balcony. I have a great view of the city, and I'm seeing all these incredible works of architecture, literally thousands of years of history in front of me along the Danube River. And in that moment, I felt incredibly lucky to be seeing what I was and experiencing something that was so outside my regular realm of experiences. With the bad weather that day too, there wasn't really many people out and about, so I had a moment completely to myself up there, and it was dead silent. My thoughts started to wander. I found myself thinking about some of my high school friends, which that's actually pretty out of the ordinary for me. I graduated high school almost 8 years ago now, and to be completely honest with you, and somewhat to my regret, I haven't really kept up super closely with any of those people. I grew up in an extremely rural part of Northern Ontario on a little island actually called Manitoulin. It's the largest freshwater island in the world, so you have a fun fact to tell your friends. But I spent a lot of time with blue collar type people growing up. You know those type of people, you know them as teenagers in high school, you don't see them for a long time, and then you go back years later, maybe for a holiday or whatever, and you see them again, and absolutely nothing has changed. They're never going to leave their hometown. They're probably doing the same thing that their parents did for work. And you probably know a few people like this. Maybe this is even you. And that's okay. I'm not criticizing this way of life, but in that moment, when I was in Budapest and I was feeling so grateful for the experience, I also found myself feeling deeply sorry for these high school friends and other people like them because they're never going to get to experience what I felt in that moment, the sheer awe of a new life experience. This got me thinking about the broader concept of change in life. Life is an absolutely incredible opportunity, but it's a very limited opportunity and it's very short. And there's absolutely nothing that we can do to prevent that. So why is it that so few people actually live? People seem so content to go about with the status quo despite the incredible adventure that's out there and it's waiting for them. And it all relates to this universal rule of human existence that we are terrified of change. So why is that the case? It's been something I've been trying to figure out. And I think the answer is always going to vary from person to person, but in some form or another, it's going to come down to fear. Whether that be the fear of uncertainty, the fear of grief from losing an old situation that you're very attached to, maybe the fear of judgment from other people. We so often seem to be impacted by that judgment. I also want to introduce you to a concept called the comfort zone paradox. Comfort zones can be helpful because they prevent us from hurting ourselves. And historically speaking, they were extremely useful because they prevented our ancestors from unnecessarily leaving the safety of their villages and finding death from weather elements or wild animals And that was a very real concern back in the day. But if we're being honest, our world is a lot safer now. Things have changed. If you live in a first world country, I'll go so far as to say that there are very few actual threats to your life, and yet your comfort zone continues to operate as if you were a caveman 50,000 years ago. So all it really does now is prevent you from doing the things that you really should be doing to improve your life. That's also a good point that I want to dive into a little bit more. And that's this idea that just because you want to do something or you don't want to do something, that's not a good indication that that's best for you. So it's important that you learn what's best for you and then you follow through on that regardless of how you're feeling. So with that in mind, I'd like to dive a little bit more into some of the specific reasons that people seem to resist change. The first one is change is more work. One of the universal rules of change is that even if it will improve your life in the long run, it is going to require more effort than your current situation, at least for a period of time. That period of time in the middle, when things are more work, relates to this concept called Cantor's Law, and that states that everything can look like a disaster in the middle. And that's really hard for people to grasp. It goes back to the comfort zone paradox that we were talking about. We're biologically wired to conserve energy, so we have a natural aversion to any kind of work. But that really doesn't mean we should avoid it. The second reason people avoid change is loss of self-image. When it comes to a major life change, whether it be a career or leaving a relationship, there's so much of that that's tied up to our identity and our self-image. And it can be an incredibly painful thing when that has to change. We see ourselves as so connected to our job or our partner, and when it's time to move on, when that's the right thing for us to do, we can fight that because we don't want to lose this familiar image of ourselves. And I can really relate to this concept on a personal level. I was a collegiate athlete at the University of Tennessee. I had a great experience there, but when I was competing, I didn't really care about anything else besides the sport that I was doing. And when I finally graduated, I didn't go pro, and I actually had to get a regular job just to pay the bills. And I wasn't an athlete anymore. I'd suddenly lost that. I didn't realize how much of my self-worth I had put into being an athlete. Certainly when I was in college, I had to leave to actually figure out how much I was relying on that. And to be honest, it took me years to discover new passions that I could focus on, and that eventually helped me rebuild my self-esteem again. So that's something to keep in mind, right? It's going to take time. It may take years when you go through a major life change to rebuild yourself, to find a new career, new passions, a new partner. But it will happen if you're consistent with your effort, and it's going to make you happier in the long run. The third reason why people are scared of change is a lack of self-confidence. Change always means a new set of challenges, and if we haven't faced those things before, then we're not going to have a lot of confidence in our abilities. And to be completely honest with you, that lack of confidence is probably well-founded, at least at first. If we've never done something before, then we're probably not going to be much good at it the first time that we do it. But over time, as we develop experience, we're going to be able to meet those challenges head-on competently. So now I want to move on to a few strategies of navigating change. I had a really interesting conversation with my therapist probably a few months back. At the time, I was in a pretty negative headspace, and I was lamenting the fact that I felt like I was in a rut with my career and just my life in general, because at that particular time, all I wanted to do was get out of the house and travel, but I didn't have enough income or flexibility in my job to do that nearly as much as I wanted to. So I felt trapped in that situation. But she gave me a really interesting concept. In my mind, I figured that I had to take a month-long trip in Europe in order to get out of the rut that I had found myself in. But she introduced me to this concept of change within your means. At the time, I wasn't in a position to just hop on a plane and go somewhere exotic right that second. But what I could do was explore a new town on a weekend, check out a new hiking trail, or eat at a new restaurant for lunch. Simple things like that can go a long way in getting you out of a rut in a way that is manageable. And this can apply to a career change too. Maybe you're not happy in what you're doing. It's not the right thing for you, but quitting your job just isn't possible at this particular moment, right? Like there's tons of self-help people that'll tell you, yeah, quit your job and go out and do your passion. But practically speaking, I know that's not always an option for people to do immediately, right? There might be family members who are relying on your income and you just can't pick up and do that. But something you could do is maybe spend just 20 or 30 minutes per night researching some other fields that you might be better suited to. That's the biggest thing that I want to emphasize, is that you don't have to do all of it at once. And in fact, I don't think you actually should. You should take it in bite-sized pieces. So as I'm wrapping things up, I would like to encourage you to embrace change in your life, remembering the concept that better is always on the side of doing things differently. That doesn't mean getting there is going to be easy. It's going to be really difficult, but it will be worth it in the end. Whether it's a career change or a backpacking trip across Europe that you've always wanted to take and you know will be good for you, but you keep putting it off, don't do that. Figure out what the next logical step towards the things you know you should be doing is, and take that step, no matter how small it is. So I'd like to finish up there how I always do, with a quote. To improve is to change. To be perfect is to change often. Thanks for listening.